Welcome, dear listener, to the Terra Incognita Archives. Settle in as we journey together into the myths and mysteries of a world long past. In the grand tapestry of Norse mythology, many gods and goddesses command our attention. Yet, one name seems to echo louder than all the rest, carried on the winds of a gathering storm. He is the deep rumble in the clouds. He is the unyielding protector of mankind. He is Thor. But let the image of the clean-shaven, polished hero of modern cinema fade from your mind. The true Thor, the one whispered about in the sagas of the Vikings, was a far more primal force. A figure of raw, untamed nature, with a beard the color of fire and eyes that burned like embers. He was quick to anger, and his power was as terrifying as it was magnificent. Tonight, in this first chapter of our saga, we travel back to the very beginning of his tale. We will explore the unique bloodline that flows through his veins, visit the great hall he called home, and unravel the strange, chaotic story of how he came to wield the most famous weapon in all of mythology. So take a deep breath. Let the thunder roll. To truly understand this god of strength, we must first look to his parentage. His father is a figure of immense complexity and wisdom, Odin, the All-Father, king of the Aesir gods, a master of runes, poetry, and relentless strategy, always seeking knowledge at any cost. But Thor's mother was not a goddess of Asgard. She was Jár, a Jotun, a giantess who was the very personification of the wild, untamed earth itself. She was ancient, powerful, and fundamental. This union of Sky Father and Earth Mother is the key to Thor's nature. While Odin represents the heavens, strategy, and the mind, Thor is the embodiment of the physical world. He is the bridge between the celestial realm of Asgard and the mortal realm of Midgard. He is strength, loyalty, and the protector of the common man. He did not sit idly on a throne in a pristine palace. He was a warrior who lived amongst those he protected. His home was Mjölnir, a colossal hall of 540 rooms, the largest dwelling in all of Asgard. It was not a place of quiet contemplation, but a bustling hall filled with the souls of honest laborers and thralls in the afterlife. But raw, physical power, even on a divine scale, has its limits. A great hall, no matter how large, cannot stand against the endless forces of chaos. To become the true champion of the gods and mankind, Thor needed tools, artifacts forged with magic, as mighty and as resilient as he was. He possessed three great treasures, each essential to his role. First, wrapped around his waist, was Megingjörð, the belt of power. It is said in the sagas that when Thor tightened this magical belt, his already immense divine strength would instantly and terrifyingly double, allowing him to perform feats impossible even for a normal god. Second, upon his hands, he wore Járngreipr, his iron gauntlets. These were not for his own protection. Few things in the cosmos could harm him. No, these gloves were for control. They were forged to allow him to handle the raw, untamed power of his greatest weapon. And this brings us to the third treasure, the most iconic of them all, the symbol that strikes fear into the heart of every ice giant and brings hope to the people of Midgard. The weapon that, quite unexpectedly, was born from a malicious prank and a single, critical mistake. The improbable story of Mjölnir begins not in a hero's quest, but in an act of petty cruelty. Loki, the god of mischief and chaos, for reasons known only to him, decided to play a cruel trick. In the dead of night, he crept into the chambers of Thor's wife, the beautiful goddess Sif, and sheared off her magnificent golden hair, the envy of all Asgard. When Thor discovered this, his rage was absolute. It shook the foundations of Asgard. He seized Loki, threatening to break every bone in the trickster's body. To save his own life, Loki swore a desperate oath. He would travel to the realm of the dwarves and find a replacement for Sif's hair, even more beautiful, forged from pure gold. Loki journeyed to Svartalfheim, the realm of darkness and master craftsmanship. But true to his chaotic nature, he couldn't simply ask for the hair. He devised a wager. He found two famous dwarven brothers, Brokkr and Eitri, and bet his own head that they could not forge three treasures finer than those made by another clan of dwarves. The proud dwarven brothers accepted the challenge. Eitri placed a pig's skin in the forge and commanded Brokkr to work the bellows without interruption. As Brokkr pumped, Loki, disguised as a biting fly, landed on his hand and stung him fiercely. But Brokkr did not falter. The first treasure was completed. Next, Eitri placed gold into the forge and gave the same command. Again, Loki attacked, this time biting Brokkr on his thick neck, twice as hard as before. The dwarf roared in pain, but his rhythm at the bellows remained steady. And so, the second treasure was finished. Finally, Eitri placed a great lump of iron into the heart of the fire. He warned Brokkr that if he stopped now, all would be ruined. As the forge roared to its hottest, Loki returned for his final, most desperate attempt. He stung the dwarf directly on the eyelid. The pain was immense, and blood instantly streamed into Brokkr's eye, blinding him. For just a single, fleeting second, the dwarf was forced to stop to wipe the blood away. A single beat of a heart. And in that moment, history was changed. The treasures were presented to the gods for judgment. The first dwarves presented Sif's new hair, a ship that could be folded to fit in a pocket, and Odin's spear, Gungnir. Then Brokkr presented his creations, a golden boar that could run through air and water, a golden ring that multiplied itself, and finally, the hammer. He presented the hammer, but admitted its one flaw. Because of Loki's interference, the handle had come out shorter than intended. It looked stubby, imperfect, a failure. Loki surely thought he had won his bet. But then, Thor took the hammer. The moment his iron-gloved hand closed around the short handle, the flaw ceased to matter. The gods declared it the greatest of all the treasures, for it was the ultimate defense against their mortal enemies, the frost giants. This was Mjölnir. It was unbreakable. When thrown, it would never miss its mark. And like a loyal hound, it would always return to Thor's hand. With Mjölnir in his grasp, Thor was no longer just a god of immense strength. He was a force of nature. He was the storm itself, a protector armed with a weapon forged from mischief, resilience, and a single, perfect flaw. Thor now had his divine strength from his bloodline. He had his belt to double it, his gloves to control it, and now, his hammer to channel it. The protector of Asgard and Midgard was finally and truly ready. But a weapon is useless without a war. And across the void, in the cold, desolate lands of Jotunheim, the giants were watching and they were waiting. The saga has only just begun. We return once more to the cold, unforgiving winds of the north, where legends are born and gods are tested. In our last chapter, we saw Thor as the ultimate power, the wielder of Mjölnir. But raw strength, as we shall see, is not always enough. In the grand tapestry of the 9 realms, there are forces that even the thunder cannot shatter. Sometimes, the greatest enemy is not a monster lurking in the shadows, but the very eyes through which you see the world. Tonight, we follow Thor deep into the heart of Jotunheim, to a place where reality itself begins to bend. Thor was not alone on this perilous journey. Beside him walked Loki, the silver-tongued trickster, and his human servants, the swift Thialfi and his sister Röskva. They traveled for days through biting winds that seemed to cut to the bone, across frozen wastelands where the sun barely dared to shine. Their destination? The fortress of the giant king. Finally, they arrived. Before them loomed a fortress so massive, so impossibly grand, that they had to crane their necks back until they were dizzy just to see the top of the gates. This was Utgard, the stronghold of the giants, a place built on a scale that defied human and even divine imagination. The iron bars of the gate were thicker than tree trunks. The group slipped through the bars and entered the great hall. The scale did not diminish. The benches were like hills, and the fire in the center was like a roaring volcano. On a throne at the far end sat Utgard Loki, the king of the giants. He did not rise to greet them. Instead, he looked down with a mocking, cold smile that sent a shiver through even the god of thunder. "We do not allow weaklings here." The king's voice boomed, echoing like falling boulders. In Utgard, every guest must earn their stay. If you wish to remain within these walls, you must prove that you are the best in the world at something, no matter how small. So, travelers, tell me, what are your talents? It was Loki who stepped forward first. Always eager to prove his worth, he declared with a flourish, I can eat faster than anyone in this hall, giant or otherwise. My appetite is legendary, and my speed is unmatched. The giant king tilted his head, intrigued. A bold claim. Let us see if your mouth can do more than just talk. The king called forth a man named Loki. A great wooden trough, piled high with cooked meat, was placed between them. At the signal, both fell upon the food with animalistic fury. They met exactly in the middle. Loki had eaten all the meat on his side, leaving nothing but clean bones. He looked up, ready to claim victory. But Loki had eaten the meat, the bones, and the wooden trough itself. Loki had lost. Next, it was the turn of Thor's servant, Thialfi. He was known as the swiftest of all mortals, a man who could outrun a deer in full flight. I am the fastest runner in the world, he claimed. Utgard Loki summoned a small, slender boy named Hugi. If you can beat this child, you shall be honored, the king sneered. Thialfi prepared his muscles, ready to burst forth like an arrow from a bow. The race began. Thialfi ran like the wind itself, his feet barely touching the ground. But Hugi was something else entirely. He reached the finish line and turned around before Thialfi had even covered half the distance. They raced a second time, and a third. Each time, Hugi was so much faster that it seemed Thialfi was standing still. Defeated and breathless, the young man hung his head in shame. Now, all eyes turned to the god of thunder. The giants leaned in, their laughter dying down as Thor stepped into the center of the hall. He had seen his companions fail, and his pride would not allow him to follow them. I will drink, Thor declared, his voice rattling the rafters. I can drain any vessel you place before me. Bring me your strongest mead. The giant king clapped his hands, and a servant brought out a long, curved drinking horn. A true warrior can drain this in one breath, Utgard Loki said. A strong man takes two, but even the weakest can finish it in three. Thor took a deep breath, tilted his head back, and began to drink. He drank with the power of a whirlpool, his throat working tirelessly as the mead flowed. He drank until his lungs burned for air. But when he pulled the horn away, he was shocked. The level of the mead had barely dropped. He tried a second time, pulling even harder, and then a third, using every ounce of his divine will. But the horn remained nearly full. For the first time in his life, Thor looked at a challenge and saw defeat. The hall erupted in mocking cheers. Utgard Loki smiled thinly. Perhaps drinking is too difficult for you. Let us try a simple game our children play. Lift my pet cat off the floor. He pointed to a large gray cat sitting by his throne. It seemed like an insult. Thor, the strongest of gods, lifting a mere house pet? He grabbed the cat around its belly and pulled with all his might. As Thor pulled, his back arched like a bow. His muscles bulged and his face turned the color of his beard. But the cat simply arched its own back, matching Thor's effort perfectly. No matter how hard the god of thunder pushed against the floor, he could only manage to lift one of the cat's paws a few inches into the air. The giants roared with laughter at the sight of the mighty Thor struggling with a cat. Enraged and humiliated, Thor's patience finally snapped. Enough of these games, he thundered. Who among you dares to wrestle me? I will prove my strength against any warrior here. The giant king looked around the hall and sneered. None of my men would find honor in wrestling you. But if you insist on a match, you may wrestle my old nurse, Ellie. An old, frail woman hobbled into the hall, leaning on a cane. Her skin was like wrinkled parchment, and her breath came in shallow gasps. Thor hesitated. To wrestle an old woman seemed a double insult. But the giants were watching, and Utgard Loki gestured for him to begin. Thor grabbed her arms, intending to hold her gently and end the match quickly. But the moment they touched, Thor realized his mistake. Ellie was not frail. She was as firm as a mountain and as heavy as the world itself. The harder Thor struggled, the weaker he felt. His strength seemed to be draining away from him, flowing into the floor beneath his feet. The more he pushed, the more she resisted, until finally, the god of thunder's legs gave out. He was forced down onto one knee. He had lost again. The next morning, the group left the fortress in silence. They walked towards the gates, heads bowed in shame. Thor, the wielder of Mjölnir, the protector of Asgard, had been defeated in every single contest. He felt small, broken, and confused. How could the gods be so easily bested? As they reached the edge of the giants' land, Utgard Loki himself came to see them off. The giant king's mocking smile was gone. His eyes were now filled with a strange kind of respect. "Thor," he said quietly, his voice low and serious, "I must tell you the truth before you leave my lands. If I had known how terrifyingly strong you truly were, I would never have allowed you inside my hall. You feel humiliated, but you should know, you are not fighting giants. You were fighting magic." Utgard Loki began to explain the illusions. "Loki," he said, turning to the trickster, "you ate with Logi, but Logi is not a man. He is fire itself. Fire consumes all, meat, bones, and the trough. No one can eat faster than a wildfire. You did not lose to a man. You lost to a force of nature that can never be satiated." "And Thialfi," the king continued, "you raced against Hugi. But Hugi is not a boy. He is thought. Nothing in all the realms, not the wind, not the lightning, is faster than a thought. Even as you ran your best, your opponent was already at the finish line because he was the mind itself." Thialfi's eyes widened as the weight of the defeat began to lift. Then he looked at Thor. The drinking horn. It was connected directly to the great ocean itself. When you drank, you were trying to drain the seas. You did not empty the horn, but you drank so much that the tides around the world have receded. Look at the shorelines, Thor. You have created the ebb and flow of the tides with your breath alone." Thor stood in stunned silence. "And the cat?" The cat was Jörmungandr, the world serpent, whose body encircles all of Midgard. When you lifted its paw, you were lifting the world itself. Every giant in my hall was terrified, for we saw the earth shake and the foundations of Asgard tremble. We were not laughing at your weakness, Thor. We were laughing because of our own fear." Finally, there was Ellie. She is old age. No one, not even the gods, can defeat old age. She takes everyone in the end. And yet, you stood against her for so long that we were amazed. You only fell to one knee when any other being would have been turned to dust in seconds. The god of thunder's grip on Mjölnir tightened as the truth finally settled in his heart. Thor reached for his hammer, his rage returning as he realized he had been tricked by illusions. He swung Mjölnir to level the fortress to the ground, but as the hammer moved, the fortress vanished. The great walls, the giants, the fires, all gone. He stood in an empty, silent valley with only his companions. Utgard Loki and his magic were gone, leaving only the lesson behind. Thor had learned that even the strongest can be blinded by what they see. The god of thunder was wiser now, but the giants were still his enemies. Join us in the next chapter as we witness the legendary duel with the giant Hrungnir. The humiliation at the castle of Utgard Loki burned in Thor's veins like poison. He had been tricked. The cat he failed to lift was actually Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. His pride would not let this stand. He did not want a contest. He wanted a rematch. But this time, there would be no illusions. Just the god, the hammer, and the beast. To find the serpent, Thor needed a boat. But not just any boat. He needed a vessel sturdy enough to sail into the deepest, darkest waters of the world. He disguised himself as a young lad, hiding his beard and his muscle, and traveled to the dwelling of the giant Hymir. Hymir was a grumpy, dangerous giant who had no love for the gods, but he did not recognize the stranger. When Hymir prepared to go fishing, Thor demanded to come along. The giant laughed, his voice like grinding stones. You are too small. You will freeze in the outer ocean. You will be nothing but a burden to me." Thor's grip on his hammer, hidden beneath his tunic, tightened, but he kept his temper. "I will not freeze," Thor replied coldly, "and I will row farther than you ever dared." "Need bait?" Hymir sneered. "Find your own." In a display of raw power that should have terrified the giant, Thor walked to Hymir's herd of oxen. He grabbed the largest, prized bull by the horns and ripped its head clean off with his bare hands. Hymir stared in silence, his mouth slightly open. He began to suspect. This was no ordinary boy. They launched the boat. Thor took the oars and rowed with such speed that the boat nearly flew over the waves. The wood groaned under his strength. Soon, they reached the spot where Hymir usually caught flatfish. "We stop here," the giant commanded. "This is where the fish are plentiful." But Thor did not stop. He kept rowing. The shore disappeared. The waves grew massive, turning from blue to a deep, ominous black. Hymir trembled, clutching the sides of the boat. "Stop, you fool. We are too far out. This is the domain of the World Serpent. If it surfaces, we are doomed." Thor simply smiled, a cold, warrior's smile. "Not yet," he said. "I am fishing for something bigger." Finally, Thor dropped the oars. The silence of the deep ocean surrounded them. He took the bleeding ox head, baited his massive iron hook, and cast it into the black abyss. The line sank down, down, down into the darkness. And they waited. The giant prayed to whatever gods would listen, while Thor simply watched the line. Suddenly, the line jerked violently. The entire boat nearly capsized. Deep below, Jörmungandr, the enemy of the gods, had swallowed the bait. The hook pierced the roof of the monster's mouth. In pain and fury, the serpent dragged the boat down towards the seabed. But Thor stood up. Summoning his divine strength, the strength of the earth itself, he pulled back. He pulled so hard that his feet smashed right through the bottom of the boat, planting firmly on the seabed below. With a roar that shook the heavens and caused storms miles away, Thor hauled the serpent up to the surface. The water exploded in a geyser of spray and foam. There it was, the Midgard serpent. It was a monster of nightmares, its scales the size of shields, its breath a cloud of poison. Its eyes were like deadly pools of yellow venom, staring directly at the god of thunder. It dripped venom, hissing a sound that froze the blood. Thor did not flinch. He glared back, his eyes burning with the lightning of the storm. This was the moment he had waited for. Thor reached for Mjölnir. The hammer glowed with a blinding light. He raised it high, muscles trembling with contained power, ready to strike a blow that would end the monster forever and perhaps shatter the skull of the earth itself. The serpent coiled, ready to strike. The world held its breath. But Hymir, the giant, was paralyzed with terror. He looked at the serpent, then at the water flooding his sinking boat. Panic overtook him, just as Thor's arm came crashing down. Snip! Hymir took his bait knife and cut the fishing line. The tension broke instantly. The serpent sank back into the depths with a splash that sent waves crashing over them. Thor's hammer hit nothing but water, sending a shockwave that flattened the sea for miles. The monster was gone. The chance was lost. Thor turned slowly to look at the trembling giant beside him. In his fury, Thor struck Hymir, sending the giant tumbling overboard into the freezing ocean. Thor then waded to shore alone, leaving the broken boat behind. He had failed to kill the serpent, but their destinies were now intertwined. They would meet again at Ragnarok. But trouble has a way of following the god of thunder. Upon his return to Asgard, expecting rest, Thor awoke the next morning to find his hand grasping at empty air. His hammer, Mjölnir, was gone, stolen. Join us in the next chapter for the tale of the wedding bride. Thor's roar shook the foundations of Asgard. "Loki, come here. The unthinkable has happened. My hammer, Mjölnir, is gone." It was a disaster. Without the hammer, Asgard was defenseless against the giants. Loki, always the detective, quickly flew to Jotunheim to investigate. He returned with bad news. The hammer had been stolen by Thrym, the king of the frost giants. And Thrym had a demand. He would return the hammer only if the gods gave him one thing in exchange: the beautiful goddess Freyja as his wife. When Freyja heard this, she was so angry that her famous necklace shattered around her neck. "I will not marry a giant," she screamed. The gods were stuck. No hammer meant death. No Freyja meant shame. The council of gods fell into a desperate silence. Then Heimdall, the Watcher god, spoke up with a brilliant, yet ridiculous idea. "If Thrym wants a bride," Heimdall said, "let us give him one. Let us dress Thor in a bridal gown. Let us put gems on his chest and a veil over his face. We will send Thor to marry the giant." Thor was horrified. "The gods will call me a woman," he protested, his pride wounded. But Loki smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Dress up, Thor, or the giants will be living in Asgard by tomorrow, and I will go with you as your handmaiden. We shall go to Jotunheim together, ladies." And so, the great transformation began. They squeezed Thor's massive muscles into a delicate bridal dress. The fabric strained against his biceps. They hung keys at his waist like a housewife. They covered his wild red beard with a thick veil, hiding his fierce visage. They rode the chariot to the land of giants. When T'Challa saw them coming, he was overjoyed. He believed his dream was coming true. He prepared a massive wedding feast, unaware that his bride was the deadliest warrior in the universe. At the wedding feast, Thor nearly ruined everything. He was starving. The blushing bride ate an entire ox. He ate 8 salmon, and he washed it all down with 3 barrels of meat. The giants watched in stunned silence as the dainty bride devoured enough food for an army. T'Challa watched in shock. "I have never seen a bride bite so broadly," the giant said. "I have never seen a woman drink so much meat." Loki, the quick thinker, whispered from under his veil, "Oh, mighty king, Freya has been so excited to marry you that she has not eaten for 8 days. She is famished with love." T'Challa was flattered. He leaned in to kiss his bride. But when he lifted the veil, he saw Thor's eyes, burning like red fire, filled with suppressed rage. He jumped back the length of the hall. "Why are her eyes so terrifying?" Again, Loki saved the day. "She has not slept for 8 nights, longing for your embrace." Satisfied, T'Challa commanded, "Bring in the hammer. Place Mjölnir in the maiden's lap to bless this marriage." This was the mistake that ended his life. The moment the weapon was brought forth, the air in the hall grew heavy. When Thor saw the hammer, his heart laughed within his chest. His fingers closed around the familiar iron handle. The disguise was over. Thor ripped off the veil. He rose from the table, no longer a bride, but the god of thunder once more. First, he killed T'Challa, the king of giants, with a single blow. Then, he killed the giant's sister and every other giant in the hall. The wedding turned into a massacre. Thor had reclaimed his weapon. The realm was safe, for now. Thor returned to Asgard in triumph. But the Norns, the weavers of fate, knew that this was only a temporary victory. The enemies of Asgard were not just giants or serpents. Time itself was the enemy. The prophecies had been written long ago. A winter was coming, a winter that would never end. Brothers would turn against brothers. The wolf would swallow the sun. The twilight of the gods is approaching. Join us in the final chapter of the Terra Incognita Archives as we witness the end of all things. Ragnarok is here. It started with the winter. Not a normal winter, but Fimbulwinter. 3 years of snow driving from all directions. 3 years without a single summer. The sun was useless. The warmth was gone. In Midgard, humans turned on each other. Brother fought brother for a scrap of food. All bonds of kinship were broken. The prophecy had begun. And in the darkness, the chains that held the monsters finally snapped. Deep in the earth, the ground shook. Fenrir, the great wolf, broke his unbreakable chains. His jaws opened so wide that his lower jaw touched the earth and his upper jaw touched the sky. He swallowed the sun, plunging the world into eternal night. Out at sea, the waters boiled. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, rose from the depths for the final time. He spat his poison into the sky and the sea, turning the water into acid. The ocean itself seemed to scream. And from the east, a ship made from the fingernails of dead men set sail. The army of giants was coming, and at their helm was Loki, free from his own bonds, ready to lead the destruction of the gods. The forces of chaos had assembled. High on the Bifrost Bridge, Heimdall saw them coming. He raised the jeweler horn to his lips and blew a blast that woke every god, every warrior, and every spirit in the 9 realms. The time for talking was over. The gods rode out to the vast field of Vigrid to meet their destiny. The air was filled with the clash of steel and the roar of beasts. The final battle had begun. Odin, the Allfather, charged straight for the wolf. Fenrir, knowing it was his doom. He fought with the wisdom of ages, but the wolf's hunger was endless. Freyr fought the fire giant, Surtur, armed only with an antler. Heimdall and Loki, the old enemies, sought each other out for a duel that would end them both. Bodies fell like rain. The world was burning. But Thor had eyes for only one enemy. He saw the massive serpent coiling across the battlefield, its poison breath melting the earth. This was the beast he failed to lift, the beast he failed to catch. Today, there would be no tricks. Thor roared and leaped into the air. Lightning struck the ground around him. Jörmungandr lashed out, snapping its jaws, but Thor was faster. He swung Mjölnir with every ounce of his god strength. The sky cracked open. Lightning poured down like a waterfall of fire, blinding the battlefield. Crack! The hammer struck the serpent's head. The sound was louder than any thunderclap ever heard. The shockwave flattened the mountains. The monster screamed, a sound that tore the fabric of reality. Thor struck again and again. He beat the monster until its skull shattered and it lay still upon the burning earth. The World Serpent was dead. Thor had won. The protector of mankind had fulfilled his duty. Victorious, but exhausted, Thor turned to walk away. He wanted to go help his father, Odin. He took one step, but something was wrong. The air he breathed was thick with a green mist. The serpent's venom, the deadly ichor, was in his blood. He took a second step. His vision blurred. He took a third step. His legs felt heavy as stone. 4 steps. 5 steps. The mighty god stumbled. 6 steps. 7. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. 8 steps. And on the 9th step, the god of thunder fell forward onto the ground. He did not rise again. Thor, the strongest of all gods, died not from a weapon, but from the poison of his greatest enemy. Soon after, the fire giant Surtur set the world ablaze. The earth sank into the sea. The stars vanished. Silence fell over the universe. The age of the gods was over. But this is not where the story ends. From the ashes of the old world, a new earth rose, green and fair. The sun gave birth to a daughter, brighter than herself. Life began again. The sons of Thor, Magni and Modi, survived the destruction. And walking through the new fields of Edda, guess what they found lying in the grass, untouched by the fire? Mjölnir, the hammer of their father. They picked it up. The legacy of the thunder god would live on. And that concludes our saga of Thor, the guardian of Asgard. From his birth to his glorious death, he remains the most human of all the gods. Thank you for joining the Terra Incognita Archives on this journey. If you enjoyed this series, please share it. Until next time, keep exploring the unknown. Goodbye.